Alrighty, so today we're going to be looking at how can we write an equation of a graph given a point and a slope. So today we looked at kind of the different pieces of things that you could get from a graph. If you were just given a graph, what did you already know about it? We knew things like the y-intercept. We knew things about the slope. Okay, we were able to talk about the x-intercept probably. We probably even talked about some transformations. Okay, so those were all things that we already knew about this graph without being able to write the equation. Well, the great thing is that since we already know those pieces, we can already write the equation of the line. Okay, those are like the bare minimum pieces that we need in order to write this equation. Okay, so using what we know, we can easily write the equation of that line, which will give us even more information. Okay, so the first equation that I want to look at, or the first form, is going to be point-slope form. Now, we used point-slope form last week to graph, and this is where we just rearranged it into slope-intercept form, which is what we're going to be doing a little bit too. Okay, now we talked about that your m, switch back to the pen. There you go. Your m is always going to be your slope. Your x1 is going to be the x-coordinate of a point. Okay, so that's going to be your x-coordinate of a point, because really, if I give you a point and a slope, you're going to use point-slope form. That's where we get the name. And then the y sub 1 is going to be your y-coordinate, just like we talked about when we graphed. Okay, so those are our three main pieces, and we're going to use that to write the equation of my line. Okay, so looking at this, number 1 says, write the equation of the line that goes to the point 1, 5, and has a slope of m equals -2. Okay, so you're given a point and a slope, so we're going to use point-slope form. Whoops, maybe. Okay, that's a weird m. And point-slope form is just y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. And we're just going to substitute in all of our pieces. So the point that we're given, what we set up here, that's going to be our x-coordinate, and our y-coordinate were x1 and y1. So we're going to label those x1 and y1. We also know that the slope is already m. Okay, so that's what we're going to put in for m. All right, so now that we have our pieces labeled, we're just going to substitute those in. So now we're going to have y minus my y sub 1, which was 5, equals my slope, which was -2, and then x minus my x sub 1, which was 1. And then we're done. We have the equation of a line. So in the next step, we're going to practice then distributing that and adding the 5 over to get this into slope-intercept form. But if I just ask for the equation in point-slope form, you could be done right here. Because we talked about last week, in order to graph that, you just rearrange it into y equals mx plus b. All right, so since we're talking about slope-intercept form, we're going to go ahead and look at that. Okay, there is a different form we can use, and that's slope-intercept form. This is the one that we use the most often. Okay, it's the one that we graph in a lot. Okay, it's just the most common one. So just a quick reminder, okay, your slope is just your m. The b value, okay, is always going to be your y-intercept. It has to be your y-intercept, can't just be any point, it has to be the y-intercept. And then remember, your x and your y are just your inputs and your outputs. Okay, so that's just your inputs. And the y is just your outputs. All right, so we're going to be using this form the most often. Most of the time, if I say write the equation, it's going to be in slope-intercept form, okay, just because it is our most common one that we use. All right, so flipping over to the next page, we're going to be using this form a lot. All right, so it says write the equation in slope-intercept form with the following point and slope. Okay, so the first one I give you the slope and I gave you the b value. We're going to label these. This is my slope, like I said. This right here is my y-intercept. Okay, anytime we're given the y-intercept, we could automatically write it in slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. all I have to do is everything's already labeled. I just need to plug those in. So I'll have y is equal to, instead of an m, now I can use my slope of negative 8x. That's a really steep slope. And then my b value, my y-intercept, was plus 5. That's all I have to do. I just plugged everything in. Now we could graph this, plot the point at 0, 5, and then my slope is negative 8, so go down 8 and over 1, and that's how we would graph that. All right, the next one, number 3, we've got m is equal to 2, and we have a point of 3, 4. Okay, so this point right here, I want everybody to write in big bold letters. This is not the y-intercept, not underline it, the y-intercept. Okay, since this is not the y-intercept, you cannot use slope-intercept form yet. Since you're given a point and a slope, we're going to use point-slope form. Think about it. If I gave you point and a slope, then you're going to use point-slope form, which point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. Okay, so now we're going to label all of our pieces. This is our m. We already know that's our slope. The point, though, is always going to be x1 and y1. Okay, so now we're going to substitute in all of our pieces. So instead of y minus my y1, it's going to be y minus 4 equals, because that's the y portion, equals my slope is 2, and then x minus my x1, which was 3. Now I asked for slope-intercept form. I didn't ask for point-slope form. Okay, so now we have to do what we did when we graphed, and we have to distribute and rearrange. So we're going to distribute the 2. So y minus 4 is equal to 2 times x gives me 2x. 2 times negative 3 gives me negative 6. We still need to get this y all by itself, so we're going to add the 4. That goes away, and I'll have y is equal to 2x. Negative 6 plus 4 gives me negative 2. And that's going to be my final answer. All right, if you have any questions about those first two, please let me know. Okay, if not, I want you to go ahead and move on to number 4. Okay, and I want you to try this on your own, and then you can check your work with mine when you're finished. All right, so I hope you tried this one on your own, and then you can check your work with mine. So I gave you a point and a slope. Since I gave you a point and a slope, this is going to be point-slope form that we have to use. Even though it says that, well, it doesn't say slope-intercept form, but we're going to do that anyway. So point-slope form is where we need to start, which is y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. So we're going to look at all of our pieces. This is my x1 and y1, and that's my m. We're just going to substitute everything in. So now I have y minus, instead of y1, I have a 1, which is equal to, my slope was 3/4. And then x minus my x1, which was negative 8. So I could write it like this, negative 8, but we know that anytime I subtract a negative number, okay, that's really going to be the same as addition. Okay, so we need to simplify that to a plus sign. Anytime we're subtracting a negative number like that, you need to simplify it to a plus 8. So now we have y minus 1 equals 3/4 x plus 8. This is slope-intercept form, or this is point-slope form, but I need to rearrange that into slope-intercept form. So we're going to distribute the 3/4. That'll give me y minus 1 is equal to 3/4 times x gives me 3/4 x. 3/4 of 8 gives me plus 6. If you struggle with the fractions, you can always put that in your calculator, but you could have done 8 times 3 is 24, divided by 4 gives me the 6. And then now we need to add the 1 over. Those will cancel out, and I'll have y is equal to 3/4 x plus 7. And that's what you should have gotten for your final answer for that one. All right, if you have questions about that one, please let me know. Moving on to number 5, it says find the equation of the line of the following graph. Okay, so looking at this, if you're given a graph, the easiest one to use is y equals mx plus b, your slope-intercept form, because you can find all those pieces from your graph. Okay, so looking at that, my y-intercept is 4. So I know my b value is going to be 4 because it goes through the y-axis at the point 0, 4. Next, I need to find my slope. Okay, so to find my slope, I use 2 good points. Well, I'm going to use this one right here and this one. So I have to go down. So I know my m is going to be negative because I have to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So negative 4 over my run, which is 1, 2, 3. So negative 4/3. So that's going to be my m. Now you have both pieces, and so we can just substitute those in as y is equal to negative 4/3 x plus 4. And that's the equation of my line. All right. Moving on to the next one, number 6. It says write the equation of the vertical line going through the point 3, negative 5. So anytime we need a vertical line, that's where we have to use our VUX. Okay. And since it's the vertical line, I know it's going to be x is equal to something. Okay. So I'm going to look at the point, and I've got x and y. So guess what? I have to use the x part because it's x is equal to, and it makes sense I need the x portion. So it's going to be x is equal to 3. That's the equation of my line. Then I ask, what's the slope of the line? Well, that's going to be the u portion. And remember, vertical lines go up and down. They're not linear, so they cannot have a slope. You can't have any type of number for a slope, so we have to say it's undefined. Maybe if I can write an n. There we go. Okay, so my slope is undefined. All right, moving on to the last one, last page. Number 7 says use the graph below to answer the following questions. We're dealing with Mrs. Mariani's disappearing pencils because we know that Mrs. Mariani somehow manages to lose all the pencils, and it's kind of crazy. So it says, letter A, the graph shows a relationship between Mrs. Mariani's pencils and the number of months. Find the slope of the graph and explain what it means in terms of context. So looking at this, first thing we notice is going down towards the ground. Okay, so that means my slope, switch colors, my slope has to be negative. Okay, so it needs to be a negative number. I find my 2 good points, so I've got one here and one here. And I'm going to go down 1, but I'm not going down 1 box. I'm going down 50 because I went from 250 to 200. So negative 50 over 1, 2, 3, 3. Okay. Now, negative 50 over 3 does not reduce. Okay. It doesn't reduce. So we're just going to write our sentence from this fraction. So we're going to say the number of pencils decreases, because it's got to be negative. So we need to say decreases by 50, which is probably more than that, for every 3 months. I would say I easily go through 50 in 1 month, but that's okay. All right, and then the next one says find the y-intercept of the graph and explain what it means. Well, if you look at this graph, it clearly starts at 250. So my y-intercept, you need to write as the point 0 to 50. Okay, and that just means I started with 250 pencils. So Mrs. Mariani started with 250 pencils. And then the last one says write the equation of the line that is represented in the graph. So you're given your slope and your y-intercept. So now you just need to plug all those pieces in. So I'll have y is equal to, instead of my slope, it's going to be negative 50 over 3, x plus my y-intercept, which was 250. And then we're done. All right. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, please make sure you're asking. If not, you can move on to your homework.